I'm Butcher Brent Young, and today we will be looking at 4 different sirloin steaks dry aged at 14, 50, 80, and a whopping 160 days. To answer the question, is steak really better with age? So this is a 14-day aged sirloin, what we consider fresh meat. To first talk about its appearance, at 14 days, you see doesn't have any crust on it, nice dark red color to the meat, and it is still pliable. It just looks like really nice, healthy beef. Here we have a 50-day dry-aged sirloin. There's a hard exterior because a pellicle has formed. That hard exterior from rotating air around the piece of meat in the refrigerator is just drying out the outside. Really dark, almost leathery in actual appearance. It has really hardened to a point where you can actually knock on it. The fat still looks really clean. We don't see any black, red, or green molds. That's a good thing. You want to be super careful that you're actually not eating any bad molds. 80-day dry-aged steak. We see on the outside that there is some mold that's developed, which is called thymidum. Thymidum growth is cool in that we know that it's imparting more flavor. It's even harder than it was before. The main difference between the 80 and the 50 is really the water loss. You can just feel that this is a lot harder. Here we got 160 days. It sounds hollow. This is just the little bit of kidney fat that's left over. We have even further thymidum growth. We can see that it's even a little whiskery. We still don't see any like blue, black, green molds, anything that looks dangerous. Compared to the 80-day, we can see that there is a drastic difference. There's more mold formation. There's even more water loss. This is about as far as we can take a steak to see, is it better with dry age? I'm super excited to cut into this because ultimately we really don't know what it's gonna look like on the inside. First of all, it smells very clean. It smells minerally, it smells irony. Nice, clean, fresh. This is freaking exciting. It smells way more of a cheese shop than it does of a butcher shop. Still super clean, really minerally, but we're definitely picking up some like blue cheese mold. So this doesn't have the same barnyardy grass quality that the 14-day had, but it already has way more of a aged leather smell to it. The exterior definitely has real cheesy qualities. The interior of it is still super beefy. It's got a sweetness to it. The nuttiness is definitely more like subtle almond nuttiness. There's almost a tart smell to it, almost similar to sherry. At this age, the smells are going to translate to the flavor. This is why you would dry age something like to this many days. It's going to impart another flavor onto it. It's going to be radically different than 20, 30, or 40 days. Way more complex smell, therefore a more complex taste. If you don't like the smell, you're probably not gonna like the way that it actually tastes. It's crazy. It's funny because there's no nice words to actually describe this because it smells like perspiration. It smells like sex. It smells like sex. It smells so meaty, so beefy, yet with all of the super umami driven flavors of blue cheese, of aged ham, of leather. I am definitely the most excited about this 160 day. I was a little skeptical at first, I will admit it, but I think this is gonna be an amazing steak that I am super excited to cook. I'm just gonna take a moment with this beauty. We just have our 14-day sirloin. We cooked about 5 minutes aside. Not dry aged. This is just our control measure for our experiment. Nice texture to it. Doesn't really have any water loss to it yet. So it should just be a nice clean steak. That was very easy to slice. The muscle fiber itself looks really nice. The texture of our 50-day steak feels really nice. You can tell that it's radically different than our 14-day. You can tell that it's just not holding the same amount of moisture that a younger steak is. It has more structure. It's been lifting some weights. Muscle fibers in and of themselves are also a little tighter than a younger steak. So as our first jump from 14 to 50 days, we've greatly surpassed the 21-day mark of enzymatic breakdown to actually tenderize the steak. I think it's really cool to notice that the dry aging process has already drastically changed this steak. It already looks and feels better than the 14-day. 80-day. From dry aging, we have two things going on. We have the water loss, and then we have the enzymatic reaction of these proteins actually breaking down, boosting flavor enhancing amino acids. It's gonna make it really nice, brown and crusty on the outside, which is upping umami, which is making it even more desirable for us to actually want to eat it. And also, noticeably, there's a thicker, more defined crust on the outside from cooking, from the Maillard reaction. Looks fantastic. The fat looks perfectly rendered. It just looks like a really, really nice steak. So even with the water loss, we still have a super juicy steak. In the process of dry aging, the enzymatic reaction that you're going to have really caps out at about 21 days of actually affecting tenderness. The moment we've been waiting 160 days for! This freaking steak. There are parts of it that I know it was a steak, but honestly feel like cured salami. The way that it feels, all of it very similar to the 50 and 80 day. I do think that the rule is true that like you're not going to necessarily gain more tenderness after 21 days. There's a really nice hard crust to this, which is just a nice example of the Maillard reaction. I can eat it? All right. Super straightforward. Does taste really clean, little sweet. It's grassy, has nice minerality to it, little barnyardy, little oyster salinity to it, but just a really, really nice, clean, fresh steak. Here we got 50-day dry-aged sirloin. You know, this is a pretty lean steak, but even having a bite with a little bit more of the fat, you always pick up more of the age with the fat. That's where you're gonna get a lot of those flavor compounds. And even that was super clean, remarkably better texture. Shocking that I'm not even thinking necessarily about the taste because the texture itself is so much better. Really interesting and worthwhile to note that while we did pick up some of the molds and some of the further development in smell, really not picking up on that through the taste. The taste is very, very clean. So I think if you're looking for like the best version of a steak from a farm, you know where it came from, you really can't beat 50 days. Just seems like the best option. That's a fantastic steak. Texture of this 80-day steak is really tender, very nice, great mouthfeel, great chew. A little surprised, honestly, that we were picking up a lot of different molds and leather smells when I first cut into it. And I'm not really picking that up on the flavor. It still eats really clean. Actually, now that I continue to talk, what I am noticing that in my mouth, I am getting like a little bit of that Parmesan feeling. The more I kind of sit with it, it's like kind of mellowing out. All right, I take all of it back. I'm totally lying. This is phenomenal. It just took a minute. Holy shit, that's cool. You get a lot of the mold that actually just like comes through, but in a very subtle way, not in like a Roquefort blue cheese sort of way. It just kind of, again, lingers in the back in a really nice, like foresty, mushroomy way. The difference between the 50-day and the 80-day is definitely just the nuance. All of the other nuance from the smell really come out, and they come out in a nice, slow, easy, subdued way that just kind of like sits with you, and you're ready for your next bite. This is a very specific steak experience. When you have some super nice ingredients and really want to like celebrate them, 80 days is exactly what I would recommend. That is truly a dramatic transformation. This more resembles a washed rind cheese than it does any of the blue notes that we picked up before, any of the molds that we picked up before. This is actually really subtle. The beefiness in and of itself, it actually feels like it's dialed down a little bit, and everything else is actually like melded together in a really subtle way. I thought it was gonna be way more punchy, way more in your face. Quite frankly, it's not. All of the nuance is just in all of these little undertones that are just lingering in your mouth. It's a subtle Sunday afternoon sort of experience that you really want to take your time with. You can tell that's still rare. It tastes super juicy. It doesn't have a lot of juice coming out of it, but the texture itself slices and eats more similar to an aged ham than it does to an actual steak. The 50, the 80, the 160, the texture was actually very, very similar, but the flavors were wildly different. At 50, we had very straightforward, really nice, beefy, grassy, fantastic steak. 80 got even more complex, and 160 was almost otherworldly in all of the different nuances that the whole thing held. Final verdict, gotta say, it's better with age. If you're looking for dry age either in the butcher shop or at a steakhouse, ask yourself, what kind of experience do you really want out of this steak? Talk to your butcher, make some decisions about the experience that you want to have. We'll guide you in the right direction.